Dear viewers across the world, most welcome to my channel NAGA World Conflict Zone. A flare up that has been shimmering for decades between Palestine and Israel. Dissect each and every actions by both sides that have led to the current flare up of hostility between Israel and the Palestinians. And you will find a known and tragic patterns of behavior. However, this is one of the rare occasions when a series of triggers took place almost simultaneously, impacting each other and igniting an already explosive situation that has been shimmering beneath the surface for decades. At the root of the fast deteriorating situation in both Jerusalem and Gaza lies the impasse in the peace process and illusionary status quo, which is affected by but is also affecting the instability of the three political systems engaged in the conflict: the Israeli, the Palestine Authority in the charge of West Bank, and the Hamas government in Gaza. In the absence of properly functioning political systems, in addition to leaderships that are suffering from various degrees of legitimacy deficit, the situation is on the verge of imploding at any moment. There is a tendency when violence breaks out between Israel and the Palestine to concentrate on the event that sparked them, and when the situation calms down, to ignore the persistent underlying condition that made it likely to spiral out of control. What has happened over the past month has dismantled the myth of stability in relation between Israel and the Palestine. This myth has been extremely useful for Israel, but it is a dangerous one that has led to that misperception that entrenchment of the occupations of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the harsh blockade of Gaza and lowering the status of Palestinians Israel to the second class citizen are all cost free and can be maintained in perpetuity. A combination of arbitrary policy and measures by the Israeli authorities and the judicial systems have turned a violation situations into a fireball, engulfing all point of frictions between Jews and Arab in the Holy Land. The chain of violent events that started in Jerusalem has escalated and spread to Gaza and elsewhere in Israel, reaching an intensity not seen since 2014, but one that underlines the magnitude of the challenging of bring peace and calm to the part of the world. Attention has turned in the past few days to the war between Israel and Hamas, but it is incomprehensible that Israel decision makers and security forces should fail to understand that if anything could give Hamas the ammunition to initiate a new round of violence, it would be tensions and clashes in the Jerusalem, and especially police and soldiers entering the Alaska compound. If there is any issue that unites all Palestinians and evokes strong emotion, it is Jerusalem. And when this Pandora box is on open, all other divisive and contentious issue between Jews and Arab are bound to surface in their full ferocity. Evidently, Hamas was looking for an opportunity to assert itself in relation to both Israel and the Fatah-led Palestine Authority. Even if this meant inflicting calamity on the Gazan people, nevertheless, in doing so, it exposed the complete perpetual intelligence in operational failures of Israel strategies. It has managed to create within a matter of days a new equation linking the Jerusalem, West Bank and Gaza front, which for Israel is an intolerable scenario. It explains, although far from justifies, Israel's massive and disproportionate retaliations, especially when another front of violent clashes between Jews and Arabs inside Israel is added to the equations. Hamas is not going to win the military battle, and neither is Israel, but the former can be said to have won the psychological one. Israel has underestimated both the capabilities and the intentions of the militant Islamic group. For Hamas, together with the Islamic Jihad, to be handed opportunity to be seen as the defender of the Jerusalem and to be the last ones left to continue armed struggle against Israel in defiance of its far superior military force is more than they could ever have wished for. Tragically, it is the Gazan people who at the best of times are trapped between a cruel Israeli blockade and an oppressive Hamas government, who must now endure a massive bombardment that has sown death and destructions and left little hope that the situation will ever improve. On the Israeli side, the rocket attacks it has suffered might harden its positions and even strengthen the political right, both in the current negotiations to form a coalition and in general elections that may take place soon should those take fail. At this point, while Israel continues to pound Gaza and mass its troops on the border, and hundreds of rockets are still being fired at Israel, a ceasefire is desperately needed, but thus far international community had failed to assert its influence to bring a halt to the hostilities. It is mind-boggling that United Nations Security Councils could not reach a common resolution which would send a message to all concerned, and in no uncertain term that the violence must end and end immediately. No side has a genuine interest in prolonging this endless cycle of death and destructions, but the two sides need external assistance to stop it. As in the past, it may fall to a regional power to broker a ceasefire. Egypt, with the active support of the Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations, has managed to do in this past, and there is no reason to believe it cannot do it again. Most importantly, when the happen is the time for immediate step to be taken on all the issues of contention to prevent any further hostilities. But now what is going on? Both sides a lot of peoples. That means Israel side 12 and Gaza side around 230 people died. So who will take the responsibility? What is the benefit from either side? That is the question. So Cartesi E.S.C. Mekelberg is Professor of International Relations and Associate Fellow of the MENA program at Chatham House.